So if you look at the components of PFC, the facilitator spent a long time working through and justifying the fact that what you need is obviously the things that you need. The typical ones: computing, data, collaboration, people-to-people activities. You need network connectivity, and you need the whole security framework, the whole authentication authorization framework that goes with it. PFC was given about just under $80 million to spend on its initiatives, to divide amongst those 5 areas and over 4 years. So when you do the maths, there's not a lot of money in each. Roughly speaking, those first 3 each ended up with about $20 million. The networking stuff we kind of already had underway, and the authentication stuff was sort of also on the way and didn't require quite as much money for infrastructure. It's mostly a policy problem. Next slide, please. So what do we end up with? Well, we got those things became 5 new programs and at least 7 new acronyms. Some of them grew out of existing work. We had major computing infrastructure already occurring at state-based organisations, and through a previous national program called APAC, we had a peak facility based in Canberra at the Australian National University. There's a website there I can almost recommend that you go to and read some of the papers. The way that PFC was initially set up is a little bit different to the way it's set up today. We now have a new version of the Australian eResearch Infrastructure Council, and it's only really about 3 months ago it started meeting in its new form. Its membership is basically the chairs of those 5 programs, the heads of some of the academies, including, of course, the humanities again, plus some senior academics who are known to be, dare I say, high profile and highly cynical of some of this stuff, but they are good to have around and they keep you honest. So let me leap into the individual programs just briefly. So next slide, please. The computing infrastructure, NCI, is hosted at the Australian National University in Canberra, as I mentioned. It's a site that's basically been doing this for 25 years plus. There's a team of about 30 people there. They are very good at what they do. And it was sort of a logical extension to just simply say to them, okay, can you guys contract to keep doing that on behalf of the country? Part of the budget for NCI was to also include a couple of specialist or shoulder facilities elsewhere. At the end of the day, when you build a national peak compute facility, you're compromised because you can't have one architecture for every single problem. You're basically building a general purpose cluster for the most part, and then you find that, well, the bio people need something a little bit more specialist, and the earthquake people need something a little bit more specialist, for example. So those are currently being negotiated, those shoulder facilities. Next slide, please. The networking infrastructure. Now, you'll hear 2 different acronyms here. One is AREN, which is the program, and you'll hear ARNet, which is actually the organisation or the company that runs the network. ARNet has gone through several iterations. Initially, it was just an ad hoc university partnership with people like Jeff Houston, in fact, some of you may know, running that in version 1, and it was pretty much all based on leased lines. Version 2 was a Telstra, one of our carrier-based services, and effectively a pure commercial leased activity. And then most recently, due to some earlier mismanagement by some of our carriers, one of them went belly up and left a whole pile of fibre in the ground, and that went to a fire sale, and ARNet was able to buy, I think, a 20-year IRU on a pair of, or several pairs of fibres around the country. And that's allowed us to grow to now a reasonably good state where we do have a multi-10 gig capable backbone. We do have some decent international linkage, both at the east to the US, out to the west, into Singapore, and from there to Europe. And I think there's one going north into somewhere around Japan or Taiwan. ARNet is now an incorporated entity with notionally the universities as shareholders in that. However, as my former Pro Vice Chancellor pointed out, he can't actually sell his shares, so it's not quite sure whether you are in fact a shareholder. AuthNet's been around for quite a while. They're very active in the typical NREN kind of space. There have been some discussions about their role and how they fit in, and that's why AREN was created as an umbrella across the top of them to basically say, well, there are things that AuthNet may not do, but that an NREN would do. And you might talk about, connectivity to hospitals, connectivity to the K-12s and others, connectivity to commercial organisations on a fee-for-service basis or whatever, as long as it supports research and education. And that's something that I think AuthNet is currently struggling with. Next slide, please.
Marcus, I'll just hold on, stop you there for a second, just for the people in the room, so I'm sure it's probably very obvious to you right now, but AuthNet is Australia's equivalent of CANARIE. Okay, next slide.
Okay. The authentication authorization space is one of those little fraught areas, as I'm sure you're aware. We've had basically 3 goes at least at getting this set up. And where we're currently at is that we actually have a National Council of University IT Directors, and they've now contracted through one of their members to be the managers of the Australian Access Federation. They are funded to basically get all of the documentation and legal framework stuff right. They provide mini grants to support small-scale initiatives for universities to get signed up as IDPs, and for service providers to get their infrastructure hooked up into this as well. It's kind of evolved over the last, probably 8 years now, and it has been at least 3 different goes, and it's ended up in a reasonably good shape at last, I think, and that's starting to be deployed as we speak. Next slide, please. The collaboration space is an interesting one. For historical reasons, we used to have, still do, have these state-based organisations around high-performance computing. And in an earlier lifetime, under what we called APAC, the Australian Partnership for Advanced Computing, these state groups got together and said, okay, we'll have a peak facility and then we'll have state-based facilities. And part of it was around computing itself, part of it was around the grid and the computing grid and data grid technologies. And when NCRIS came along, that was slightly split up and restructured. And we ended up with this thing called the Australian Research Collaboration Service, or ARCS. It is still this partnership of partnerships, and because of that, it does have some fairly significant, I think, governance and engagement issues. It's slightly more painful than herding cats. And there's a fair bit of angst, I think, in some of the university sector that it needs to be improved a bit. And so there's a fair bit of work happening there at the moment to tighten that up. There is also a fairly strong flavour in most of those state organisations that they have come from that high-performance computing world, and that they're now taking on other things that you kind of expect them to, like data grids and so on, but also other things that you might think an NREN might typically do. So some of the conferencing technologies and some of the web-based collaboration stuff that they're looking to support, you kind of wonder, is that the right place or not? That's an evolving space, and I think watch this space is the message there.